So we are an import-dependent economy. In that sense, the need for exports to keep pace with that is really important.
I just fully believe that trade is the base of development, actually, because when you're talking money, you're talking with numbers. People see the benefits.
US is a big market, so they think obviously of their market in a different way. At the same time, it is one of our traditional large export markets, and we've had access to the US for a long time, and the EU. We may have a lot of skills here, but we also need to kind of improve upon it, bring in new practices, bring in new processes, new technologies, people who know newer techniques. Simply, we may have a shortage of certain types of specialized skills.
Hello, this is Decision Points on Echelon, and today we are discussing how trade aids economic prosperity by contrasting the approaches of Thailand and Sri Lanka to trade liberalization. In the studio with us are Parima Damrithamanij, who is Senior Manager Global Trade Advisory for Deloitte in Thailand, and Ruvini Fernando, who is Head of Strategy, Risk and Transactions at Deloitte in Sri Lanka and the Maldives. Ruvini, Parima, welcome to Decision Points. Ruvini, let's start with what's happened in Sri Lanka over the last 2 decades or so. We're talking about FTAs and putting that into the Sri Lankan context here. Sri Lanka's share of trade in the region and share of trade as a percentage of GDP, trade as a percentage of GDP, I think has declined in the last 2 years. What does this say about the health of Sri Lanka's economy and future prospects for growth?
Thank you, Shavindra. I think we've started off on an interesting topic to speak about. Just today, we saw some of the export statistics that were released by the Export Development Board and the government. It has been very encouraging because together with merchandise exports and services, I think we've had one of our best years, if not the best. And that's very encouraging. But as you very correctly pointed out, our share of exports as a percentage of GDP and trade as a percentage of GDP, actually, if you take the last over 2 decades, from the year 2000 to 2023, a World Bank study indicates that it has actually halved. So our trade to GDP has actually dropped from 88% to something like 42% by 2023. And exports to GDP has declined from 39% in 2000 to 20% in 2023. Now that really tells us a story. And in the region, the share of exports within South Asia for Sri Lanka has been something like 7% in 2000, and it has declined to something like 2% in 2023, which means actually our neighboring countries have forged ahead and we have fallen back a little bit.
So our neighboring countries are doing a larger share of the regional export and import than us, basically. So
than us, yeah, than us in the past. So we were doing 7%, we are now doing 2%, which is very small. Right. So this really, if you really go back to fundamentals, what this says is that Sri Lanka, we are an import-dependent country. As you know, we are dependent on fuel and on some of our essential products like medicines, some food items and other things. We are dependent, and a lot of our machinery and raw materials are also imported. So we are an import-dependent economy. In that sense, the need for exports to keep pace with that is really important, because eventually you don't want to have a deficit or too much of a deficit, right? So that surplus is what we've been looking for and wanting to be export-oriented as a result. And that's really the driving force. The other key thrust on exports is because if we are to accelerate growth, and now we're talking about coming out of the crisis and accelerating growth. The domestic market we have of 22 million people really doesn't help all the industry to accelerate to the extent we need or grow to the extent we need, serving a domestic market. Hence, the need to be more outward oriented and promote exports to overall grow GDP and improve incomes.
A company can't have efficiencies of scale because the market here is so small.
Absolutely. In certain industries, you need a reasonable level of scales, and the domestic market may not be sufficient for that.
Parima, let me bring you in. I wonder, off the top of your head, to start with, whether you have some evidence about how Thailand has done over the last decade to, in terms of its participation in global goods value chains.
Well, I would start from when the time I started my government career then. So I joined the trade negotiations department of the Ministry of Commerce.
Sure.
Actually, when I entered the ministry, I just fully believe that trade is the base of development, actually, because when you're talking money, you're talking with numbers. People see the benefits, and the benefits actually expand to other things, besides, just the business. I think development, standardization of, all the measures and technology comes in. So that's how I see that, trade is actually helping the economy as a whole.
Has Thailand, in that time when you engaged on matters relating to trade in Thailand, first as a bureaucrat and now as a consultant helping companies make the most of these trade agreements that Thailand has, in that time, has Thailand's participation in global value chains increased? Has its share of exports as a percentage to its GDP also increased, I'm wondering?
It has increased. Well, I don't have the numbers on top of my head, but when I did, the time I joined, I think we already started negotiating and concluded some of FTAs, and there were some concerns of public participation at the time, and then we had the amendment to the constitution around the time that I joined. So and then we had the constitutional obligations, to have the conclusion. The negotiation result must be passed in the parliament.
Sure.
And because of that, the government, the Ministry of Commerce by Department of Trade Negotiations, try to get the public more involved in negotiations process.
So to have trade agreements passed by Parliament, that required a constitutional amendment
now,
by
yep.
what you're saying. I'm wondering whether you are aware of how the legislature's involvement in FTAs. Does the legislature or Parliament have to approve FTAs in Sri Lanka's context, Ruvini?
Honestly, Shamindra, I'm not sure of that. But I think I'll take an important point from Parima's example or what she said. Is that we need to have public awareness and buy-in when we go for FTAs, when we look at export promotion. I think that's something everyone understands, but it's also at the same time necessary for us to look at trade as a whole, and that means imports as well. So that openness to trade means being open to both exports and imports. And in Sri Lanka, this is particularly important because when we kind of manufacture things to export, we also need to import a lot of inputs. So that sort of buy into the overall need for trade openness and liberalization is quite an important conversation between the public as well as the business community.
Parima, I think you started an important part of your career at the Department of Trade Negotiations. In your experience, what mechanisms did the Thai bureaucracy use to navigate these negotiations, because there are so many stakeholders around the table when it comes to trade negotiation. Were there particular strategies or approaches that you saw that worked well in bringing that inclusivity, so that there's a sense of ownership about the deal?
Well, starting off, trade negotiations, FTAs, of course, we started off from export and import. The deficit, the trade deficits. And so very first step, you took your participation from the business sectors. So practically the public sector that has the economic strategy duties in the government. We have Office of Fiscal Policy, we have Office of Agricultural Economy, and Office of Industrial Policy. So those are public people who have monitoring, overlooking different goods from different sectors, agriculture and industry. And then you have the private sectors come in from, the Chamber of Commerce. They may have some representatives from different sectors, different industries that they think they are important. So we would like to open this market. We would like to expand these products. We know that these products are the potentials of Thailand. So they talk to the government, the negotiators, to, let's say, you need to look and actually when you started this off, you would not look at only trade negotiations. You looked at the whole policy, national policy of driving the industry coming. So that's, the part of national plan. So I guess negotiations need to go hand in hand with the national economic plan.
So you're telling us a couple of things there. First, you take into consideration the national strategy, and then you bring key stakeholders, particularly the private sector, who may be directly impacted by liberalization of trade, right? Has it been your experience that those around the table in those early negotiations are very welcoming of the opportunity for trade liberalization, or do you find a divided kind of table when you start these negotiations? And what's your approach if you find dissenting views?
Definitely divided, and dissenting opinions are around. And I would say that negotiation conclusion is not the winning outcome for everyone, but I guess it's internal negotiations among the agencies and also among the private sectors, that let's say we would like to protect our farmers, maybe in some particular agricultural products, but then we need to be aware too. The government would say, let's say the office who's taking care of agricultural industry sector would say that you need to improve. If you don't improve, let's say, the manufacturing process, processed food would be more valuable than just raw materials, right? So that's how you convince them to, and also help them improve their own production. So then their value, the value of their products increase over time. But then you also need to give transitional period during the negotiations. Let's say for these agricultural products, we talk to the sector that, how many years would you like to have the transition? And the government will need to help too, in terms of having the program, supporting them grow, engage other players in the industries to help them learn how they can improve their manufacturing process and things like that.
Ruvini, I'm assuming Sri Lanka's trade negotiations or negotiations internally for liberalization have been fractious, because we've achieved relatively little in the last 2 years. So much so that you say, you now highlight that, our share of trade to GDP has halved. So if we assume that they were fractious, how do you think the new policy climate aligns with the thinking that Sri Lanka's future may be more prosperous if we better integrate with the world? Do you think that's better aligned now? What are the challenges?
Certainly, what you see now, Shamendra, is that the government has spelled this out as a priority in their current policy framework.
Right.
We all understand the importance of it, particularly post the economic crisis, because that was precipitated by a shortage of foreign exchange. That was one of the key factors. So its importance is recognized, but I think the next step would be to actually figure out what are the tools we are going to use to bring more people within the more people who are capable of exporting, improving their productivity, improving their technical skills, improving their human resource skills, access to technology.
And thus their competitiveness globally.
Yes, eventually leading to better competitiveness globally. So you need to kind of figure that out. As Parima very correctly said, it's bringing more and more people into the export net, empowering them, particularly even the SMEs. And that means they need to be enabled. So you have to use a host of policy measures, including FTAs would be an important tool, but even being open to other inputs. So FDI, for instance, foreign direct investment, which comes in along with not just capital, but skills and access to technology would again is something that we should welcome, because that will bring in a new sort of dimension and learning to the local economy, and that will help to uplift others who are
so what you're saying is, if I gather right, FTAs can't be looked at in isolation as the tool that will take Sri Lanka make Sri Lanka a more export-oriented country, but it's only one of the tools in the arsenal of things that will make Sri Lankan industries globally competitive. Has that been the experience in Thailand also, Parima?
Exactly. Because when, let's say, when I was in the trade negotiations department, we have the public dissenting opinions as well. Why opening up the market? We are not competitive, against other countries. We're gonna, lose our trade deficits. It's problems have been raised all the time. But then when, I guess, over, let's say, 10, 20 years of trade negotiations, now I think the trade negotiations department itself doesn't look at FTAs as market access only. It's about, when you're talking to the trade partners who are more developed than us, we have the chance to learn new technologies, new measures, new, the ways that they approach to problems, let's say climate change. We have right now the new, we call it new FTA provisions, talked about environment, talked about labor standards, talked about trade and sustainability. So the topics are wider than only trade, only export and import. And that's how we can look at FTAs as some tool. Then again, all of this negotiations, the word say itself, it's about talking and exchanging. But then when you want the development itself, you need to have the measure to help your people, have the careers, have the professions, manufacture, and, those sorts of things are from the action of the government and the private sector together.
Ruvini, when you look at what's happening globally now, particularly in the US, there is a move towards being a little more insular in what is put out to be as self-interest, right? Now one may kind of sit here in Sri Lanka and look at what's happening out there, particularly in the US and some places, and suggest that, hey, there is something for Sri Lanka to learn and gain from that kind of behavior. What would you say to that argument that Sri Lanka should take note of what's happening out there and perhaps learn from that? Is there something we can learn, or are circumstances very different?
Actually, I think, Shamindra, what's happening out there is maybe a short-term concern, but also a long-term opportunity.
Right.
Well, at least I personally see it that way. See, the US is a big market, so they think obviously of their market in a different way. At the same time, it is one of our traditional large export markets, and we've had access to the US for a long time, and the EU. But these are also mature markets, right? And the growth rates can vary, it can also be slower. One of the trends we see now is a move towards people in the neighboring area getting together. So ASEAN has a very good trade bloc within themselves, and this is kind of expanding into more regional trade blocs. And Sri Lanka has been showing interest in joining these regional markets, because while your traditional markets are growing at a slower rate, the markets closer to home are growing at a much faster rate.
Right.
So it's about how you also enter those trade blocks and negotiate your position competitively within those. Because China and India are growing much faster than the rest of the world, right? And if we can position ourselves correctly within those trade sort of areas, then we have more potential to export. So maybe it is in the long term, it's an opportunity for us to really diversify markets, number one, and also the kind of products that you would be exporting to those markets may not be the traditional products. So again, Sri Lanka as a country has been very concentrated around 5 or 6 key product lines like apparel, tea, spices, rubber-based products, etc., which are, the exports we all know about. But the need to, again, diversify away, because these new markets may need newer types of products.
Parima, I'm wondering how Thailand's experience has been, given that, that the ASEAN region is fairly well integrated. The supply chains are well integrated, right? Sri Lanka has had little success with free trade agreements, particularly so with multilateral free trade agreements. The few we have are all bilateral ones, and we are struggling to get them operational in the first place. Are multilateral ones inherently more beneficial in Thailand's experience, and are they more complicated to negotiate?
When you talk about multilateral, you talk about ASEAN?
ASEAN in particular.
Okay.
ASEAN, and perhaps you have trade agreements, and you have to fill me in with the European Union or particular trade blocs like that.
Well, I would say that ASEAN has a very long history. Maybe we did not start off only for trade. Also, ASEAN, I think it has I don't remember the 3 charters that economic, social, and political, and things like that. So that's how the relationship has been in ASEAN. But then I think the economic part grow so well and very fast, and it comes to the story of that you cannot produce everything by yourself. Maybe China and India can, or the US itself, because the country is so big and you have lots of geographic differences and lots of skills. But then for smaller countries, you cannot do everything, and that's how ASEAN comes together. I think this is kind of linked my negotiations experience in the past, and also right now doing the utilization of FTAs. So let's say when you have the ASEAN FTAs, you can accumulate. It's called accumulation of local content. So to get the preferential duty rate, you just need to produce in ASEAN. So this part of, let's say, a pen one part can be produced in Laos, PTR, and another part from Myanmar, another part from Thailand, and that you can still enjoy the rate of exporting to, let's say, Singapore. And
because
that's how.
because Singapore, for instance, in this case, will require a certain amount of value addition,
Yeah.
and you can do that
Within the
with the ASEAN partners together, right?
And that's
Okay.
how you, if you do this to, importing into ASEAN, from outside ASEAN into ASEAN and then ASEAN out, so that you can have what you call like fighting the supply chain itself in within your region. And that's how I think the economy of the region grows, because but then we have the benefits of, pretty much almost everyone is in near the sea, and that's transportation is good and things.
And that's interesting point there, Ruvini, that if you apply that that context to Sri Lanka, you mentioned Sri Lanka's share of regional trade has declined to 2% from 7%, and how does one start tackling this? The fact that not only is trade low, but our Sri Lanka's integration with regional supply chains or supply chains extending to Southeast Asia are poor. Is it possible to craft a strategy without looking at those building blocks?
Definitely, it would be difficult, Shamendra, because I think plugging into those global supply chains has been something Sri Lanka talked about, and that's an important component again of our export orientation strategy. So certainly, like I mentioned, the free trade agreements and joining the regional trade blocks would be one of the strategies or tools which we use to get into that. But at the same time, we need to also see what sort of new skills, technologies, new industries we need to get into. How do we upgrade the skills of the people? How do we, if it is a manufacturing industry, provide them the infrastructure? Because again, the lack of sort of industrial zones and space within the industrial zones is another challenge Sri Lanka has been facing. So you need to also have the infrastructure to be able to kind of promote investments to come into these sectors and be open to both investments, skill transfers, knowledge transfers, technology, and so on. So it's a package of things.
On the same point, I'm wondering how Thailand's policymakers reacted when greater trade integration potentially brought foreign investment and investment in general, right, grew in the goods manufacturing. How did government policy align to make it possible for those industries to emerge? Just because there's interest in investment doesn't mean industries will flourish. Parima, how did government policy align in Thailand?
Well, actually, in the FTAs, right now, I think the newer FTAs have investment provisions. So the provisions are the legal, let's say, I think, rights and obligations among, the FTA member states, FTA parties. So then you need to recognize their rights and all of those principles of having the investment maintained. But then you have the other side of the policy are from, let's say, the promotion. So we have the board of investment, which and also the customs free zones. So that's have we have the let's say the land resource for, let's say, EEC, Eastern Economic Corridor right now. So that's the zone for the industry. So we have those incentives of like if you're coming in to invest, so then you have, let's say, the tax holidays, you have the benefits of duty exemption, you have the benefits of being able to bring the skilled labor to foreign skilled labor to work and that sort of thing. So those are the incentives of attracting foreign investment into the country. But then the incentives will be focused on particular industries that we think we have potential, and then we have some rules that let's say under one of the laws, Foreign Business Act, so you need to also hire the Thai people
Sure.
To maintain the proportion of foreigners and Thai people. So then that's how we get the
Are these
technology
components
transfer.
you're referring to ones that relate to some level of service integration, some level of investment related provisions, now common in FTAs that Thailand is negotiating?
Pretty common in all the FTAs. Even
Right.
in ASEAN FTAs, we have trade in goods, trade in services, and investment provisions.
Right.
Those are the main economic related provisions.
Right. And when you look at these provisions related to services, investment, etc., what do you think are the main objectives that they're trying to achieve? We understand, okay, you bring down tariffs in a very simplistic sense, and then there should be a freer flow of trade between two countries. But what are the objectives of bringing in service-related provisions and investment-related provisions altogether, generally?
Well, in tariff, we have tariff concession. This is getting very technical terms. In service, we also have the services schedule commitments.
Sure.
And when we negotiate services, we're talking about sectors. So there is some market access, obligations, and then we have the regulations. Let's say domestic regulations in the country that are imposed on service sectors within Thailand. When we negotiate FTAs, you may try to get, let's say, like Thailand to get to country X. If we go into this industry, we will not get, discriminatory treatment from the governments, things like that. So that's how you negotiate service sectors and investment sectors.
So when you're talking about service sector deregulation or opening up the service sector, you're talking about that mode 1 to 4 level kind of liberalizations, right? Ruvini, given Sri Lanka's context, right? How would you advise policymakers to approach FTAs in the future? Should we, because we've had such a tough time with, getting them negotiated and also implemented, should we just focus on the basic goods and potentially tariff concessions on both sides for trading in goods? Or are we missing out on something if we don't include those additional provisions that that can potentially sort of propel an economy because there's more liberalization happening, like in services and investment?
Yes, Shamindra, I think goods would still be important. Because that has traditionally been what we've been doing. But if you again study the recent data and what was released recently in the press, is that services have been actually growing at a faster rate in Sri Lanka than goods. And being a small market and a small economy, I think services are also ideally suited for us to look at, how we can position ourselves more competitively in the world. So the IT industry is a very good example where we have made considerable sort of progress in being able to increase our export earnings. Foreign exchange earnings and inflows from the IT sector. We also see now the port related services gaining in importance. So the Port of Colombo is one of the most attractive and competitively placed ports in this region, and the earning potential of that. So those are the service related income areas that we could consider. In the past, we've talked about Sri Lanka being a hub for certain things, for education, for instance, which could be a new sector for us. Or medical tourism, for instance, because both education and health, we have a sound base in the local economy, and you can certainly build on those skills to enhance the foreign income that we can earn from these. But that requires a lot of policy frameworks to be put in place to be able to again attract global players. Because given the services only that we have in Sri Lanka may not be adequate for us to actually cater to foreign students or foreign patients in those two sectors respectively. But you may need additional skills. You may need top class universities to come and set up in Sri Lanka, top class medical providers, health service providers to locate here as well, and augment the skills and the capabilities we have locally.
Is it your view that services liberalization is inherently a little bit more complex than just dealing with goods, because everybody will feel that they have a stake in this, and their work or their profession is at risk from foreign workers?
Yes, this is a concern, and I think it needs to be handled with care, because if you want to create a world-class service around a particular sector, you have to augment the skills with skills available outside of Sri Lanka, because we may have a lot of skills here, but we also need to kind of improve upon it, bring in new practices, bringing new processes, new technologies, people who know newer techniques. Simply, we may have a shortage of certain types of specialized skills. In healthcare, it could be certain specializations of doctors or nurses. So in which case you have to augment your workforce. It has to be done in a reasonable and practical manner. We can develop our own skills over a period of time, maybe to bridge the gap. You have limited amounts of overseas workers or skilled workers coming in. So it's a discussion and it's a journey. But certainly, if we want to kind of kickstart these new sectors that we are looking to develop, then I think some initial augmentation of the workforce and the skill levels would be required, Shamindra. It's a sensitive topic, I agree, but something that we will need to sort of consider going forward.
Parima, just following up on what Ruvini is talking about, I mean, ultimately, negotiations become complex if individually, everybody in the population feel they are about to lose something because of liberalization, be it services or trade in goods, right? How has Thailand managed to allay fears, if they're actually fears, only fears, or some of these concerns may be real? People may end up being impacted by liberalization. How did Thailand manage to navigate this and make sure there were more winners than losers, far more winners than losers?
Well, I would say that negotiations or opening up markets for services and investment, you can look at both ways. You will have, the foreigners coming into Thailand, let's say, and work, and Thai people would be afraid that they will lose their job. But in the meantime, if there are 3 modes or 4 modes of services, and one of them is just like investment. So the establishment of the service, so that's actually adding jobs. You will have, let's say, a very, qualified universities from other countries, and they are set up in Thailand, and then you get more jobs. Thai people will get more jobs in that university, and maybe develop some other skills. Languages can be one of it, and also like other fields. So I would say that you can look at both sides. So when you are attacked with the questions of fears, then you talk back of the opportunities that are coming with opening up service and investment.
Ruvini, how can Sri Lanka balance attracting foreign talent to address skills gaps with ensuring that we also do local talent development? I'm asking you, is there a broader way to approach this challenge?
Yes, certainly, Shamindra. The reason is the skill gap was partially created in the maybe very recent past due to migration as well.
Sure.
So you actually see that Sri Lankan skilled workers are occupying jobs somewhere else.
Sure.
And the gap was created. So you need to breach that and bring that in. So as we go forward, what could happen is that by opening up and bringing in new skills and creating new industries and more higher value industries and services around these sectors, you could perhaps attract some of those people back, or at least prevent more people from going out.
Sure.
So that's where the local skilled labor will benefit immediately, right? They'll have a reason now to stay in Sri Lanka rather than going out. Those who went out might actually think it's a good time to come back. Then over time, the government and policymakers need to have a concerted policy around developing the necessary specific skills. So you look at higher education. It's like you look at the broader sectors, maybe it could be healthcare, it could be education, it could be IT services, it could be tourism. You need to develop those specific curriculums and the training programs that are needed to address those. And automatically, because those investments have come in, you'll also find that there are, on the job, in practice, people also can work with these new establishments and learn more new skills on the job. So it's a mix of things, and it'll take time to kind of close the gaps, but you could do it in a sort of phased out manner.
Parima, is it your experience that the kind of thing Ruvini is talking about, addressing skills gaps and attaching timelines for if somebody invests, they have a period in which they can potentially hire more foreign workers because there's a skills gap, and then have in that time train the local talent that is required to take on those positions. Can provisions like that, in your experience, be baked into FTA negotiations? Can they be part of a negotiation?
It is actually part of negotiations.
Right.
I think there are also the provisions of cooperation. There are some FTAs that we have negotiated that have cooperation provisions.
Right.
And then there are programs, held, co-hosted by all the parties or two parties of the FTAs. And that's helping in terms of, reducing the gap, the skill gap. But also we also have other policies that try, when you look at let's say the current status, I think the Board of Investment just has the new policy of adjusting the long-term stay visa for the foreign skill, because we think that we need more of them to come in, because the innovation and technology go so fast, and we need those people to stay longer, to have incentive to be in Thailand more. So the government has adjusted the terms and conditions for those visas. So that's one of the examples that can be. But of course, I don't think Thailand is much different from Sri Lanka in that way, that some of very skilled workers in Thailand would prefer to work outside Thailand to get like better benefits and get to better living standards and things like that. So that's happened in our developing world, I guess, and that's how the countries will need to look into attracting them back.
Thailand has come a fair way in integrating with ASEAN supply chains, etc. I mean, you are now a manufacturing hub for vehicles, and several other industries are seen as Thailand is seen as a center of ASEAN for the manufacture of. When you look at from where you are, the challenges for greater, deeper integration, for trade to contribute even more to the Thai economic growth, what do you think are the one or two challenges now for Thailand? Given that you've made come a long way in the last 20 years, what do you think are the now challenges for Thailand?
I think the world that has been changing fast or slow, and you never knew, the rules that the US will impose tomorrow would
Sure.
be. So that's how that's how the challenges
Sure.
stay. So and even when you're talking about automotive manufacturing industry, we the growing industry in the past has been the fuel-based automotives, and right
Sure.
now we're moving into EV cars.
Sure.
So that's another new realm. So we are not in the safe zone. Hey, we just need to change, and that's how the government will need to look at attracting more foreigners, because we think that we need some innovation knowledge to help us grow again. I don't know, it's maybe another wave coming, the changings and things like that. In a way, I feel that we always follow the trends. I wish sometime Thailand can run faster and become
Become the trend.
Yeah, become the trend and people follow us. But that again needs the drive of very much innovation in the country and things like that. So I would say that we're still growing. The government is quite active currently in trade negotiations, but then we need to really leap to that sort, the
Sure.
middle income.
I think
trap and things
BYD
like that.
already, the Chinese EV maker, already has a fairly large plant in Thailand that's running. So that's and there's also battery manufacturers who are
Yeah.
set up in Thailand.
Yep.
So those are
Yep.
emerging technologies.
Data center also.
Sure. Ruvini, Sri Lanka doesn't have that fortune of being well integrated into goods manufacturing supply chains. And if you look at Sri Lanka's population, also most of those in the workforce are already employed. Unemployment is not a very high number here. So when Sri Lanka approaches trade liberalization in general, should we take identical strategies to what has been successful for Thailand, or are there specific circumstances around Sri Lanka that we must be more sensitive towards?
We need to take account of our own conditions, Shamindra. So our market is smaller, and as you said, we don't have a lot of unemployment, but we may have some sort of underemployment. I think we have young people who are not in formal employment. Our level of formal employment is less, informal is more. So bringing more people into the formal workforce and all that, and upgrading the level of skills. So those are sort of the unique challenges that Sri Lanka has. And in terms of innovation, I think there could be pockets of areas. It could be in different sectors. Ayurveda, for instance, is something unique that we practice, maybe a few other countries, but there could be unique pockets of skills and innovations that we can bring to the world, that we can showcase, and we need to pick and find those. And sometimes it may be actually the smaller businesses, the SMEs who are engaged in that. So we need to also bring them forward and facilitate for them to grow to the next level, to become competitive exporters. So we have to, I don't think we can sort of emulate what other countries do like one-to-one, but certainly we can pick examples, but we have to craft our own strategy, in my view.
Right. Parima, Ruvini was talking about the need to, bring SMEs into as beneficiaries to trade liberalization. SMEs, by their nature, aren't so well integrated with, supply chains. They tend to be standalone ventures, often led by one individual, right? What has Thailand's experience been with liberalization and their impact on small and medium-sized businesses?
Well, of course, some of the SMEs in the past, have been, I would say, complaining too that they are not integrated, and then, they cannot compete with other big corporations in the world trade. Well, this is my personal opinion, anyways. In that, I guess JSMEs need to ask themselves first if they are ready. Each of them, do they feel ready to to be integrated, or are they having fun? Because some SMEs, would be more fun doing business domestically. But then I just talked to one of my previous bosses, and she's in the program under the Ministry of Higher Education, Science, and I don't remember the exact name of the ministry, but it has the program of incubating. But well, when I said incubating, maybe not the right word, because those SMEs who are in the program are not the baby ones. They are, let's say in secondary school.
Sure.
And then you just need to help them grow faster, educate them in some the technologies, have some advisors, innovation advisors, marketing advisors, legal advisors to help them grow bigger, because they feel that, okay, now we are ready to be in the bigger market, global supply chains. And that's how she started talking to me that, okay, maybe some kind of other advisories can help them. So I guess the SMEs need to consider themselves where they would want to be when they grow to the certain level. Then the government just also has to have some support. And when I see that support from my previous boss who is in this ministry, I think it's a good program. And then there may be other programs in other agencies as well.
Ruvini, if in conclusion, if I ask you this, given where Sri Lanka is now, and if you were to give a couple of pieces of advice on how Sri Lanka can move forward to consolidate the recent gains that you referred to, exports of goods and services in particular have closed at a record level, albeit we are very far from where we were 2 decades ago. And if you were to give one or two pieces of advice, what would those one or two pieces of advice be for the policymakers?
One would be, Shamindra, is to create more awareness about Sri Lanka, both as a destination from which they can import, or as an exporter, what is our profile,
Sure.
and as an investment destination. Given the happenings of the last couple of years, I think our overall perception in the global marketplace has gone down because we went through a crisis. We are facing competition both in exports and to attract FDI. The statistics show it anyway. So the first thing is that we need to create more confidence around the revival in the Sri Lankan economy, communicate that story better, and also communicate some of our success stories and what we are good at. The competition needs to be addressed. We have to be outward looking rather than always trying to fix what's internal. We also have to look outside and see how we can address the competition, how we can get to be known in the world, and be appreciated for the good things that we can do and the capabilities we have. So that outward sort of marketing and addressing competition is important. At the same time, I think the fundamental building blocks of fixing what's internal also has to happen, which is improving our skills, improving our openness, negotiating our FTAs better, facilitating FDI to come in, upgrading the workforce, lots of things that we need to put in place in the domestic front as well.
And Parima, final question to you. Thailand today is a manufacturing powerhouse. I think over the last 2 decades, it's made giant strides in becoming very integrated to ASEAN and global supply chains, right? Obviously, the benefits of free trade have been experienced by the Thai population. And when you're looking at going forward, right, how do you convince those who remain skeptical? How do you convince those who may not have benefited as much by the liberalization? And if that were a stumbling block, how do you start addressing that?
Well, from a very optimistic world
Sure.
point of view, I don't think that everything has all the negative. Maybe the market access from other countries may affect your job in the country, but then you have the chance to get to more products, innovative products, the technology that comes into the country, the development of the standards, and things like that. Maybe the costs are more, but then you have you need to pay more costs in order to produce something to sell to the other developed world, let's say a country in the EU. So that everything will not be only like you get the good result without paying anything. So that's you need to educate the public itself. If I could touch on some of, let's say, the NGOs, negative point of view on FTAs, which I totally understand, let's say the IP part, because the intellectual property would, affect them, how they can use the product and things like that. And even those, the negotiations that did not succeed. Let's say the old negotiations with the US, and people have been very disagree with what we negotiating with them. I guess that's the lessons to the government and also to our people ourselves. And then to time passed, and let's say we going to negotiate again, will you look at those issues the same way? Have we, passed or gone by any obstacles? Or are we still at the same place?
Sure.
We have not developed at all? Or I think that's, I guess like you cannot get everyone, agree and say, hey, happy, but then you I guess it's democracy, right?
Yeah.
So
and what you're suggesting is, hey, look back at the success of the achievements of FTAs and the impact they've had on the economy. And then you can see that it's largely been very positive, at least in Thailand's case. And that is evidence that, we should potentially deepen march forward towards liberalization. Parima, Ruvini, thank you. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Sha.
A pleasure on mine too. Thank you both.